Welcome, everybody, to Cinema Royale. I am Travis Hobson of PunchdrunkCritics.com, and we are back from Sundance Film Festival 2023. It was a great year. It was good to be back. It's been a couple years since we've been there, and the last couple have been virtual. This is the first in-person, I think, since 2020. It's good to be back in Park City. You guys, everyone who's been following the site knows that I love the week I spend in Park City. And this one was pretty good, too. Movies got off to a slow start, but I would say it picked up by about day 2 or 3. Things really started to get going and saw some really good stuff. You see with me today is Cortland Jacoby. She writes for us, as you well know, and it was her first year at Sundance, being there in person. So Cortland, good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Travis.
Absolutely. Look, you got your Sundance shirt on and everything.
I've got my water bottle right here.
Jesus Christ.
Nice. You gotta have all the swag.
God. Well, except for the hat, because they didn't have any hats. There's my opening complaint about Sundance. They have fewer attendants.
Yeah.
They sold out of hats.
Like the second day, which is...
They were out the first day. They were gone. So we were supposed to get some back like later that day, and I'm sure they did, and then they were already gone again.
I bet that they had a bunch come in on Wednesday, the day that we were supposed to leave. There's no other way for it. I did order a hat online.
So did I. It's already on the way. So
yeah,
but it's not the same. I get it.
No.
I get it to wear there, and now I'll be wearing the 2023 hat in 2024.
Yeah,
and I'll wear it for like a day, and then hopefully I'll have the 2024 hat.
I left my 2022 hat on the bus the first day, which was
I lost my 2020 hat.
Yeah,
I lost it at the holiday. It was in my lap, and I stood up and I walked out, and then I went back in there to see if it was by my.
It was gone.
It was just gone.
Yeah,
garbage, man.
Yeah, I really should have. Hot tip, guys: if you need a hat and you're at Sundance, we should have probably looked at the Lost and Found. I kept thinking that, but I never made it over to one.
Yeah. They told me that. They told me that the holiday Lost and Found, the stuff there gets moved to headquarters every day. And I never made it over to headquarters to go check their Lost and Found. I told Chris to do it, but I don't think that he remembered. So anyway. Whatever. I went to the Fresh Market and got myself a heat holder hat, and it was awesome. So super warm.
I was an idiot and just went bareheaded the whole week. And
you told me I would have got you a hat.
It's cool. I was kind of an all or nothing person. If I can't have the Sundance hat,
I wear light. Like I wear light jackets there, even no matter how cold it is. I wear a light jacket, so I always have to have a hat on for that reason. I don't like it.
I was very layered, and I had thermals on a lot of the time, so I was pretty warm, even though I had a dress coat.
It sounds terrible and hot. I can't do that.
I actually wasn't. I was surprised. I highly recommend this thermal brand. Anyway, no one wants to hear us talk about thermals.
Everyone wants to hear about this.
They want us to talk about movies.
I know. Let's talk about some movies that were there at Sundance this year. Let's just start off. Let's keep it simple. We'll talk about some of the stuff that we like and some of the stuff that we didn't. Let's start with the stuff that we liked. All right. So everybody knows by now my favorite movie at Sundance was Rye Lane. I've talked about it so much. I'm actually sick of hearing myself talk about it. So I don't want to say too much about this really amazing, colorful, energetic, romantic comedy starring 2 really strong, incredible Black leads, which is not common. And I just love the setting of it. I wanted to go to that place while I was watching the movie. I wanted to be there. I love the music. They got a Tribe Called Quest, Salt and Pepper, all sorts of stuff. Terrence Trent D'Arby, all the stuff that I love is in this movie. It was almost like they were making it for me. But I really just enjoyed the humor of it. I liked the way the lead male character Dom, played by David Johnson, how his character starts off at this lowest point, and we don't get to see Black men in romantic comedies show that kind of vulnerability, even for a little bit. It was good the way she sort of lifted him up throughout their journey through town. I thought that was really great. I just love this movie to death. Like I said, I'm sick of talking about it. But it's coming out. It's going to be on Hulu in March. I believe March 31st is the day it's coming out. So it's going to be out very soon.
it makes me a little sad that it's not getting a full theatrical release.
A little
That
bit.
they're taking the same route that, like, Fresh was a standout for me last year, and Hulu snatched that up. So I'm a little bummed that that's happening with Rye Lane. I saw it at home, and I definitely feel like it would have been way more immersive if I was in a theater. But I too really, really enjoyed Rye Lane. For some reason, it made South London seem warm to me, and as somebody who's been to South London, it's not always warm. It's dreary and cold, and I absolutely loved the colorization of the film, and then also just it's just fun and an homage to past rom-coms, and just like
Best
you said,
cameo ever.
shows. I'm sorry.
Best cameo ever.
Best cameo ever, which we're not going to spoil, and it's a sweet little treat that's just a joy to watch.
Yeah. Give me something that you like. What was your favorite movie there? What was your top movie that you saw there?
My favorite film was a film that was part of the US dramatic competition, which Rye Lane was as well, called Fancy Dance. Directed by Erica Tremblay, who works on the great FX show Reservation Dogs. Highly recommend that show. And it's about an Indigenous woman whose sister is missing, and she's taking care of her niece, and eventually loses custody to the niece's white grandparents. And so in a last-ditch effort to have some sort of closure for the niece, Jax, the aunt, takes her to a powwow. Whether that is kosher and legal is up in the air. It is one of the most cohesive films I have seen at Sundance. The way Tremblay directs and writes just goes together so perfectly. Two really, really strong standout performances by Lily Gladstone, which is a name you're going to be hearing a lot over the next 2 years. She's starring next in Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon as Leonardo DiCaprio's wife, who's the lead of this. She's the lead, not Leo. I mean, he is too, because he's there and he's Leo, but she's the lead. And so you're going to be hearing her name a lot, impeccably played by her. Wonderfully real. Sorry, my notifications are going wild.
I was like, is that me? But
no, I have my Discord writing app up, so I've been doing that. Anyway, it's a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant film. Isabel DeRoy Olsen plays Roki, the younger, the niece. Highly recommend the film. Shea Wingham plays, is it Wingham?
I always just call him
Wiggum. You see one of the greatest character actors working today. He plays one of the white grandparents.
He's in a couple films there at Sundance.
I'm sorry?
He's in a couple films here at Sundance.
Yes, yeah.
Also in Eileen.
Yeah. And so highly, highly recommend this film. It also brings together two issues that are facing the Indigenous community right now. The first being endangered or missing and murdered Indigenous women. And then also you have a Supreme Court case that's about to go this year, which is who should be raising Indigenous children? Should it be white people? Should it be
sounds like a case from the 18th century.
But that's the thing about America, things that should be in the past or not. Yeah. So yes, I loved Fancy Dance. It's also has a biting sense of humor to it. You wouldn't think so by my description. I just think it's very, very well done. And I am a little bit sad that not more critics are talking about this. I feel like I'm the only critic that is. So highly, highly recommend Fancy Dance.
Fancy Dance and Rye Lane, we did interviews for both of those films.
Yes, we did.
So I feel pretty good that we got interviews with the two films that we like the most.
Yeah.
I talked to the stars of Rye Lane. You talked to Erica Tremblay.
Yes.
She is a native filmmaker as well.
She is, yes. And she talks about how, in my interview, she talks about how she was raised by her words, quote unquote, her brown mother, and was constantly worried that her white father's family would come and take them away as a kid. So this definitely stems from her own life as well.
Yeah. I also was a big fan of Cassandro, which you see over there in the corner of my screen there with Gail Garcia Bernal. Look, everybody knows I'm a big professional wrestling fan. This movie is deep into Mexican lucha libre, but it deals with a guy, real life guy, who was an exotica, which is it's the cross-dressing wrestlers basically, and then in that culture they're always treated as weird and as feminine and weak and like easily to beat, and they're usually humiliated. That was the culture. It's a very masculine culture, and he decides to turn the tables on that and to be an exotica who wins. And he becomes so popular. He's over the top, flamboyant, becomes so popular that he does start to win, and he eventually gets a match against the champion, which is a big deal for an exotica. It's just a great story, and as a wrestling fan who knows the history of this stuff and knows the history of this guy and the way wrestling is in America as well, which is also a very masculine culture. He's sort of like Mexico's Gorgeous George. In America, we had wrestlers who were flamboyant and exotic, quote unquote, like Gorgeous George decades ago. And he was a heel and he was very popular, arguably the most popular wrestler of the time. So we had that before Mexico did. Like Mexico took decades to get to the point where they had a guy who flipped the script the way Cassandro does in this movie. So I just absolutely loved it. Bernal is fantastic in this, and it's a role that demands him to do more than just act. It's a very physical role too. They get the action scenes very good. The wrestling scenes are very authentic. And Roger Ross Williams, Oscar-winning filmmaker, he's mostly a documentarian, but he brings that sensibility to this story too, and into a narrative. It's really, really well done. So yeah, Cassandra is one of my favorites. I absolutely loved it. Look, you put a wrestling movie out there, I'm going to watch it. So I mean, and I'm going to nitpick it. I mean, I nitpicked Fighting with My Family a few years ago when I went to the world premiere of that at Sundance. And that one was also very good. But this one is also great. So I'm happy to see that it was so well done.
How do you think it's going to be received by both the wrestling community and the LGBTQ community?
I don't know. I don't even know if it's been picked up or not.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if it's been acquired yet. I think the LGBTQ community will embrace it if they bother to go see it.
Right.
I'm not so sure like traditional wrestling fans will actually go see it once they hear what the story's about. If I'm perfectly honest. Sounds
like it depends on marketing, really.
Yeah, it does depend on marketing, but I'm not so sure you can market it without the LGBTQ angle. It's such a I mean, it's the thing that drives the movie, and I think that's great. But I don't know how traditional wrestling fans will be like, well, I really need to go see that movie. I'm not so sure that'll be the case. But I think others will gravitate to it for their own reasons if it gets picked up and if it's with the right studio. When it comes to all these Sundance movies, it really does matter where they end up. Going into this year, more movies than I think ever were already acquired before we ever got there. So there weren't that many like big acquisitions over here.
There was only like 4 really big acquisitions. Yeah,
not very many. And even then, a couple of those, I'm like, I really wish those had gone somewhere else. But yeah, it'd be very interesting to see where Cassandra ends up. What about you? What's another one that was a favorite of yours?
I'm gonna steal one that we both saw.
Okay.
Flora and Son, man. John Cardy's 4th film, right? If I'm counting correctly. And you know what? He's a master at what he does. He is the auteur Wes Anderson of like the grounded musical movie. I mean,
Wes Anderson wishes he could make a movie with this what the feeling as John Carney can put into his.
That is very true. Don't get me started on the French Dispatch. I will say it was so freaking charming, and it's led by Eve Hewson, who, yes, is Bono's daughter, but is a mega talent in her own right. She just starred in Sharon Horgan's Apple TV series, Bad Sisters, which again, underrated, highly recommend that show. And in this, she plays a single mom living in, I think, Dublin. We don't really know where in Ireland, but definitely Ireland. And she's living in the project-like setting with her son, who is a teenager and, is a teenage boy and hates her guts. And her husband or ex-husband is a former one-hit wonder who is kind of smarmy in his own right, but it's John Carney, so nobody's really bad.
It is Jack Rayner, whose characters tend to be
Jack Rayner, who was also in Sing Street. And I so in order to bond with her son and kind of stick it to her ex-husband a bit, she decides that, I'm going to start taking guitar lessons and learn how to songwrite. And she does, with an American over Zoom, played by the charming Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Full disclosure, I had a huge crush on Joseph Gordon-Levitt in high school, and this movie just made it all come back. It was the chemistry Houston and Levitt have together is just palpable and electric and very, very sweet. And the way Carney handles their romance is very, very touching and not smart, not too saccharine. It's not
John Carney movies are very earnest. They
are, but
super earnest.
So they meet over Zoom, right? Yeah. And I don't want to spoil what happens, obviously, but there's something that he decides to do that he talked about at the Q&A that I think just toes the line between being too sweet and just the right amount. And then also he does a filming technique that I really love that has them together as well. So yeah, highly recommend Flora and Son. It's fun. It's catchy. I feel like musical projects are kind of making a comeback now, especially with Daisy Jones and the Six coming out. So we'll see where Flora and Son goes. It's coming out on Apple, but we'll see how it does.
Yeah, John Carney. Yeah, musicals are making a comeback, but I never really think of John Carney's films as musicals. I know there's a lot of songs in them, and he generally have very good soundtracks. Although I'm not so sure this is the best of. This might be the one that has the least good soundtrack of the four. There's one song in here that I would really like, and the rest of them is kind of eh. But the thing is,
they all can't be Drive It Like You Stole It.
No, they can't.
They can't. But I still really liked the main song that they did. I think it's great. They all collaborated on it.
No, me too. It's just I don't think of them as musicals because most musicals aren't necessarily about people who love music. It's people. His movies are they're all about people.
About people who love music. And he really does play with this idea of diegetic versus undiegetic sound, which I really, really appreciate.
He makes movies about the power of music to bond people together, and he explores it from a different angle with each movie. There's romantic love, there's professional love, and this movie there's love between a mother and son. There's and puppy love, young love in Sing Street. He explores it from different angles, and I like the way he does that. And that's one of the things that I love about his movies. Because he clearly loves music, and he loves music and the way it binds people together. So he makes stories about that, which I really like. Other musicals don't; they just tell other stories and add songs to them. So look, I'm a big fan of John Carney. You know that, everybody knows that. Huge fan. I even the things I don't like about him, I find charming. The over-the-top corniness sometimes, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character. You liked him. I like him too. He's corny as hell. Most of the things he says sounds like they came out of a self-help book. And there are a lot of characters that are like that in John Carney movies, and you just kind of accept it. But yeah, I love this movie too. If you go to our YouTube page, I captured some of the post-premiere Q&A, not all of it, unfortunately, but I did catch a lot of it, so check that out there. But yeah, it's a good film. Apple is going to be interesting to see what they do with it. When they decide to release it, and if they decide to give it a theatrical component or not, I don't know.
I definitely feel that Apple needs to get better at their marketing. I mean, yes, they just won an Oscar last year, but like some of the best TV is happening on Apple and I'm seeing nothing for it. Like I said, Bad Sisters. Causeway was one of my favorite films of last year. And I feel like that was barely pushed at all.
Unfortunately, Brian Tyree Henry got an Oscar nomination.
Thank God.
Yeah, I loved Causeway as well.
So let's hope that they do the right thing here, and definitely market it right.
Yeah,
because it's smile inducing. I was smiling the entire time.
Oh yeah, there were a few movies at Sundance where I caught myself smiling the entire time. Florence on is one.
Rye Lane.
Eve Houston's character is so great. I think she's the best single character that he's had in any of his 4 movies.
Yeah,
fantastic. And Rye Lane, of course, I was smiling the entire time. Another movie that I was smiling the entire time. Well, there are 2 more that I was smiling the entire time for. The next one for me is Fair Play. I absolutely love this movie and the power dynamics in it, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't want to give too much away about it. It's a story of 2 people working in a high-powered Wall Street office, a boys' club. Think Boiler Room if they dropped a woman in the middle of it.
I've also heard it compared to Industry, the HBO series as well.
Probably, but I don't watch that show, but I've heard those comparisons too. There are a couple. The film starts with a very bloody engagement, and I won't say why it's bloody, but it's interesting. But the movie's bookended by blood. These people get engaged, and they're working in this high-powered Wall Street office together, and one of them gets a promotion that the other one wanted to get, and it causes a disastrous shift in their relationship. And look, it's one of those movies that's me and my buddy Chris Bunbury, who everybody who watches this show knows, we compared it to like a 90s Michael Douglas thriller, which like Disclosure, very Disclosure-esque in a lot of ways, except from a different angle. This one's framed more from the female perspective, and I think it's different because you have this, like I said, this couple that are about to get married. So it's a different dynamic, but the way the power shifts between them is very much the same. And I like the way that it reorients itself multiple times so that you can sympathize with one and not the other. It also is the most perfect casting of Alden Ehrenreich ever, because he's such a punchable douche in this movie. And you just want to just kick his ass. There were at least 10 times in the movie where I just wanted to slug him. And I was just like, I just wish somebody would just knock him out right now, just the way he's acting in this movie. I just want somebody to kill him, and he's just so good for it. I hope it reinvigorates his career. Not that he necessarily needs it, but I want to see his career take off the way I think it probably should have. I've been a big fan of his since his first movie, Tetro, years ago. With Francis Ford Coppola. There's a reason why Coppola cast him in that movie. He was extremely good in it. He's a very good actor who I think has been tarnished by a Solo, the failure of that movie.
Which honestly is not that bad, guys. Come on.
It's really not. It's just a different kind of Star Wars movie, and people weren't ready for it. But he's a really good actor, and I hope this movie does something for him. Now, this movie went to Netflix for $20 million. I really wanted somebody like Neon to pick it up. That was
that's the vibe.
I wanted somebody who was going to push it out there and do some really clever marketing for it and make it this year's Fresh or something like that. That would have been really buzzy. I'm not so sure Netflix will do that. They'll just drop it on the weekend somewhere and that'll be the end of it. And that's the thing that scares me about it, because I want more people to see it because it's really smart. These kinds of movies that deal with sexual dynamics in the workplace, they can be very broad and not very sharp, and I feel like this movie's pretty sharp.
One thing I will say, I have not seen the film. I do know that we should probably put a trigger warning if you are going to watch it for a certain scene. And the other thing I will say too is, as somebody, this was like the film of the festival. I would argue everybody was talking about Fair Play. It was on a lot of people's first lists. one thing that was interesting is like I would listen to male critics talk about this movie and be kind of turned off. And then when I would hear female critics talk about this movie, it intrigued me a little bit more. So just go into that like knowing, this is a film about power dynamics and I'm intrigued to hear more female voices about it.
Sundance. This was a great Sundance if you like watching men get humiliated. There are some really great humiliation scenes in the Sundance movies this year. And as somebody who doesn't care if guys get humiliated, I just laughed about it. And it was I just noticed it. I was like, man, a lot of guys getting embarrassed and just deep-pantsed in this festival this year. What's going on? But then again, you got what they say, 50%, 56% of the filmmakers this year at Sundance were women.
And so then I think like
maybe they were like, let's get our revenge and humiliate the men.
up to 70% of first-time filmmakers were women as well. I think it was 70, maybe 60 or 70, one of the two.
Yeah. So big shift there, which I really, really like. But yeah, Fair Play, definitely one of the movies of the festival. We'll talk about another one in a minute. But let's get another one from you that you really like.
Oh, my third one. Okay. The last screening that I saw was a repeat screening for a little film called Past Lives.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people in line talking to me about that movie, and I wish I had seen it. Very
quiet, but devastating. And it reminded me of a little bit, and you're people who've seen the movie will kind of be like, okay, where are you going with this? And the people who haven't will kind of expect something different from what I'm saying. But there's that scene in Everything Everywhere All at Once where we see all the different lives that Michelle Yeoh's character could have lived. Yeah. And there's that wonderful scene where Ki Hye Kwan's character says, I would have loved to do laundry and taxes with you. Yep. And so that idea of like, in another life, I would be doing XYZ with you even if we didn't end up here, is something that kind of carries over into Past Lives. Past Lives is very grounded. It's a drama. It's a love triangle that is shown with so much empathy and so much love by the director. It's based on her real life. And it's just so well done. Greta Lee plays Nora, who we meet when she is leaving Korea, coming to America. And she kind of has her first love in Korea. They flirt, they talk about getting married. She's 12. It's very, very cute. And then, of course, she leaves and they lose touch and she grows up. She figures out she wants to be a writer and do all of this playwriting, and they kind of weave in and out of each other's lives over time, and it's not always the best time. She gets married to John Magara's character, who is a white guy. And he...
what category was Past Lives in? Do you remember?
I believe it was premiere, maybe World Dramatic Competition.
Okay.
Did
it win any awards?
It did not, unfortunately. And I'm
scrolling. If you see me looking down, I'm looking at my phone. I'm scrolling through the movies that are still available because they were award nominees.
That was never online.
Okay.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I didn't like about it. The reason why I saw it in theaters, which I'm glad I did, and not on
there's a couple of them on
not
here.
On screeners. Yeah. Like Florence.
Mutt is on there right now, actually. I kind of want to watch it.
Which one? Mutt? Mutt's good. I watched that as well. But yeah, I really...
Shortcomings is on there too, and I don't want to watch that at all.
I'm sure we'll talk about Shortcomings in a minute. But no, I highly recommend Past Lives. It's a very sweet, contained story. Very, very well done. By director Celine Song, and very personal. A lot of people were crying around me in the theater. It's just well done and a really modern way to do a love triangle.
That one been acquired? That one's already been acquired, right?
A24.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that will probably be in theaters, unless, it goes to some sort of streaming platform.
All right. Another one for me that I like, we'll go through a couple more. We don't go through everything. But I'm gonna go through a couple more for me. Infinity Pool, which I absolutely love. This was my other favorite. They had me smiling a lot during the movie. I say that I'm smiling throughout the whole thing. The movie's extremely violent and extremely grotesque in a lot of ways, and yet I like that sort of stuff. So it was great. But yeah, this is the Brandon Cronenberg film. It's his third film. All of them have debuted at Sundance. It was Antiviral more than a decade ago, Possessor a couple of years ago, and now this. Of course, he's the son of David Cronenberg. I actually think he's far better than David right now at this stage of his career. Crimes of the Future is atrocious. But anyway, but yeah, this movie is way over the top, and it stars Alexander Skarsgård. And of course, Mia Goth, who I think is the best actress working today, period. I just think she's amazing. And I'm pissed off that she couldn't get an Oscar nomination simply because her movies are horrors. Because anybody who watched those movies knows that she was better than just about anybody who did anything last year. And she's great in this too. And basically, somebody asked me what was there to like about the movie. And I was like, well, because I had a friend in the line with me who walked past me, and I guess he heard me laughing during the movie. And he walked past me and he's like, Travis, I don't know what the hell you were laughing at during Infinity Pool. And he's like, I thought it was just awful and just terrible and dark and I don't know what you're laughing at. And when we crossed each other again, I said, if you couldn't find something funny in how ridiculous this was, then there's something wrong with your sense of humor, because this movie is funny and it's about rich privileged people and what the extremes that they might go to if they know there will never be repercussions for their actions. And we're dealing with that. That's something that we're dealing with in this country right now, with people who are privileged and powerful who don't seem to ever face repercussions for the crimes they commit. And this is taking that to the extreme, obviously. And I'm not going to spoil everything that happens in it, but Alexander Skarsgård's character gets swept up in that. And he has the best humiliation scene of any scene of all time. It is just the greatest thing ever. And Mia Goth,
Travis is like really into degradation.
Huh? Was that?
I was just saying you're really into degradation this year. Like really
you know
into
what? They made a couple. The thing is, here's the thing about the way they've done it, though. It's in both cases, they're extremely masculine men who, by the end of it, I couldn't look at them the same way. Like, somebody asked me about the movie, and I was like, about Skarsgård and Infinity Pool. And I was like, I found it hard to believe that he was ever in the Northman after watching them in this. He gets so, I don't know. It's just so dehumanized and so left a broken person by the end of the movie. I was like, how was this guy ever in the Northman? I don't even buy it anymore. So it's just, and Mia Goth is just, she's the catalyst. She has my single favorite line of all of it, in all of the festival in this movie. And I had friends asking me all week about it because the movie is in theaters now. It came out on Friday the 27th. They're really excited for it. I know a lot of my friends have already gone to see it. I may go see it again tonight with some friends. It's just really fantastic. But yes, it is very, very gory. It's very violent. It is also very funny if you're into dark humor. And look, this movie's not going to be for anybody. The reaction has been polarizing. I think it has a C cinema score or something like that. And it does not surprise me at all. But then again, I don't go into a Brandon Cronenberg or even a David Cronenberg movie expecting it to be universally loved. I just don't expect that. And the people who are acting like they should are ridiculous. So yeah, Infinity Pool, I cannot recommend it enough if you're into a certain kind of movie.
I mean, I'm always here for Mia Goth praise. And I love that she's having a horror moment and, want her to keep doing these films. I thought she was one of the best parts of Emma. And I hope that she
she's great
down that road too again. So
yeah,
I think I'm always here for Mia Goth killing it.
She's a legitimately good actress. The fact that she's found her niche in horror, I think is great, but she can do other stuff too.
Yeah. And I hope directors don't forget that. I don't hope studios don't forget that. Yeah.
Right. She may have just found the thing that she likes to do, and then she just wants to keep doing more horror stuff. But yeah, it's good to see her in other stuff too. All right, let's get one more that's a favorite of yours, and then we'll start talking about some other stuff.
Okay. So for me, you mentioned this film, Mutt. I didn't expect to like this movie at all. Not that a lot of the descriptions at Sundance when you're looking through these films are like the most mundane way of describing something. And it's, often kind of a turnoff unless you like the subject that it's about. We're seeing a lot of stories about trans men right now. I mean, trans women right now, which I think is a very interesting trend that people more knowledgeable, can talk about. But we don't see a lot of stories about, women transitioning into men. And I think Mutt is a really, really great humanizing example of that doesn't, it doesn't, how do I say this? It's not sappy and it's not an after school special, I think, in a way that we've seen a lot of LGBTQ and trans stories being told. So we follow Fina through one day in his life, kind of post-transition, as he reconnects with three people that, for whatever reason, he's grown a part of. And I think what's really, really great about this director is how relatable he not only made Fina, but also made the story. I've had situations that obviously happened to me that happen in the film, and I think it's very very relatable. I think that like some people will just learn about reproductive health as well. Like there's a scene where Fina has to go get Plan B, which you're like, a trans man getting Plan B, what's that about? Well, that happens. There are trans men that have periods. So I highly recommend Mutt. It's a very self-contained story. There's a lot of character studies at Sundance this year, and this is definitely one that should be checked out. The lead, Leo, I think it's Leo, I forget their last name. But he won the acting award at Sundance this year for his performance. So I highly, highly recommend Mutt when that comes out. I don't think it has attribution yet.
Yeah, the trans theme of a woman becoming a man is also in the Penelope Cruz film.
Right. Yes. But from a child's perspective, yeah.
Right. From a child's perspective, yeah. We had that kind of on in the background while we were all working.
Yeah. And again, musical. There are musical elements to that. So every time we saw that,
the only thing Tim and I took from it was that people were getting smacked a lot. There were a lot of people getting slapped. That's the only thing we saw. A lot of kids getting smacked around. Yeah. So that's the only thing.
It seems like, so this is my first year in person, second year at the festival, and it seems like every year there's kind of themes that emerge.
Yeah.
And this year it seems like humiliation of straight white men. And last year was abortion. Yeah, abortion. I did the abortion trilogy last year. I covered the abortion trilogy. And then this year we're seeing a lot of films about trans individuals, LGBTQ individuals, and then just humiliating straight white men, which I am here for. Yeah.
So before we talk about some of the movies we weren't really that big on, you brought it up just a second ago. This is your first year in person there. Give me some of your impressions about being on the ground in Park City for the first time. How was it for you? Did you enjoy it? What are some of the things that you took away from it?
I absolutely enjoyed it. There is nothing like, going to the Eccles or going to the Ray. Those are theaters in Park City. And just being with a group of people, seeing a film for the first time. It forces you to pay attention, which I think I'll be honest, the last 2 years, it's been very difficult to sometimes watch screenings from home because your phone's right there. You've got emails to answer, stuff like that. It's wonderful to be in person. The energy is just so different. Like I met so many amazing people in line and in coffee shops and in hotel lobbies. Like that is what makes Sundance really, really cool, is the people that are running it and the people who are a part of it. Which you don't really get online. Like, yes, last year was very much about the art of the films, but this year it was about the camaraderie. It did feel, and except when the buses were were slow. It didn't feel as crowded as I thought it would be. And you've told me that like attendance was down and that even among critics, I think what's really interesting, and I've been talking to other critics about this, is they've got to figure out for next year how to do like how criticizing from home is going to work, how reviews from home, how critics watching from home are going to do it. Do they get a set number of films?
Yeah, they went too far. They went too far this year. They made the online so accessible that a lot of people didn't come. Like, I mean, there were a lot of outlets who were like, well, we'll just save ourselves the $5,000 or whatever the cost is to go out there, and we'll just review from here. Because whether or not you did it online, like through the portal, studio publicists were more than happy to send you screeners for almost anything that you wanted to ask for. So there was like no reason to go for a lot of people. I spent one entire day where I really didn't have to go anywhere. I only went out because I felt like I should, but I didn't have to go anywhere. I could have watched anything I wanted to at home.
I watched 16 films.
I watched 2 movies that day from the crib. So
I watched 16 films this year, and 5 or 6 of them were sent to me.
Yeah.
And half of them I saw at Park City on principle alone. So, but there were no, like last year with online, there were restrictions on like when you could watch certain things and what kind of screener that you could get that you watched online. This year, there was none of that, just for a little context for our listeners. There were,
other than you had to wait like a day or two after the premiere.
Absolutely. But
there were also so many other movies that you could just watch something from a day before, there was, it wasn't.
But I'm saying the number of films that you could watch in that time period was pretty much unlimited. There were only like a handful of films that weren't online. Florence was one. You just mentioned Past Lives is another. So I just found that very, very, very interesting. Yeah.
They're definitely gonna have to fix that. They're gonna, or at least figure out what their priorities are. Because look, I was there and I noticed the lack of attendance, the lack of like, I felt no anxiousness about getting to any screening. Like I just went and I was like, I was always able to get in anything. I only saw people getting turned away twice, and they were
didn't get at all.
Right. I only saw two situations where people got turned away because there was too many, all because the place was full, and they were at public screenings.
Yeah.
So so it wasn't that. It really was something that was really rare. But they have to decide whether or not they care about that or not. Because the people that didn't show up still paid a lot of money. They still paid a lot of money to have access to those movies.
Yeah.
So especially like I have a lot of friends who come to Sundance and they have nothing to do with the industry at all. They're not film critics. They're not in the industry. They're not anything. They just go to watch movies. None of them came. None of them came this year, and that's because they all said we can watch them from home. And I think a lot of people did that. Now I know they spent just as much money from home as they would have if they were there in town. And Sundance needs to make a decision whether or not they care about that or not. I mean, it's not as if the place was like empty. It's just less people. And honestly, I kind of liked it. In a certain way, I kind of liked it. I don't always like the place to be as crowded as it is. It was certainly a hell of a lot easier to get around the Fresh Market this year. My wait for my morning coffee was a lot faster. They had my coffee ready for me every time I went in there. They knew I was coming. So so I didn't mind it so much. And as long as Sundance keeps making its money and movies keep getting sold, they probably might not change that much. They might change a few things, but they might not change that much.
I think they need to limit the number of films online and make that known pretty early on of like, these are like 5 to 7 films that we're only doing online.
Problem. Sundance never lets us know these things until they send out the press is open, by the way, or when you get your badge, like, okay, this is your badge's parameters. Like, what? So
well, I mean, if they want people to come to the festival, they have to give people enough time to do that. So to like schedule everything. So I don't know, like they've got to figure it out though. I don't know. But the also thing is, I don't know if they know that's a problem.
Oh, I'm sure they know.
Okay. Well,
I'm sure they know. Sundance is probably the one that has one of the best press offices of any Sundance of any festival that I've ever attended. They're really great, really
and wonderful.
Not always the most responsive during the festival because the festival's going on, but before the festival, they're very responsive. So I think they probably have a pretty good idea of everything that was good and bad about this year.
Great volunteers as well. Wonderful, wonderful
Volunteers are
people
great.
that stand in like 10-degree cold
Yeah,
for hours.
the best.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some movies that we did not like necessarily. And I know which movies I'm gonna go with, but we're gonna start with yours. Give me one that you weren't necessarily feeling.
Well, how many are we doing here?
Just a few, like 2 or 3.
Okay. I'm gonna start off with one that I think we both really didn't like. But for some reason, like people we know did, and I just thought it was a hot mess. Which is Theater Camp.
Hey, how's that review coming along? You got that review almost done there?
Yeah, I do actually. It's one of the ones. Theater Camp. What
You would love this movie.
Hated it. And like I heard some things about stuff that happened on set that I won't repeat here. But I heard some things that happened on set and was not that like kind of turned me off already.
Yeah.
And really, I didn't really want to watch it, let alone cover it at that point. But once you're told to do something, you do it. So I didn't
don't make it sound like I bullied you into doing
it. No. Like Travis lets me pick certain things, and Travis lets me pick.
Neither one of us really wanted to do Theater Camp. Let's put it that way. Neither one of us really wanted to do Theater Camp.
It was in our
I thought I was gonna like it too. I thought I was gonna like that movie too. I really did.
So it follows basically a theater camp over a summer. It's a mockumentary. If you're wondering what theater camp it's based on Stage Door Manor, where like everybody and their mother in Hollywood went. It's really interesting that Stage Door Manor hasn't come up in this Nepo baby conversation, by the way, because it should. Speaking of Nepo babies, a couple of Nepo babies made this movie, including Nick Lieberman, who's the director, one of the directors, and Molly Gordon, who's the other director and star. Ben Platt is in it. Of course, Ben Platt is in it. Noah Galvin,
Noah Galvin, yeah.
Is in it. And I gotta say, he's probably one of the best parts for me.
He is one of the best parts of the movie. Well, I wish the movie had been centered more around his character.
And the children as well. And then some of also like the side counselors as well. Like there's
Ayo Edebir from The Bear. She's okay.
She's great. I liked her. I liked also the dance instructor and the fashion design teacher as well, or costume design teacher. So yeah, we're just following people trying to make a original show at a theater camp after the head of the theater camp, played by Amy Sedaris, thank you, goes into a coma. I felt like they were trying to go for a mixture between like The Office and Wet Hot American Summer, and it just didn't land. I found like everybody unlikable. It just felt like a mess.
You know why this movie doesn't work for me? First of all, whenever somebody makes a movie like this at a drama camp like this, I feel like they're all trying to emulate Todd Graff's Camp from like 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
Which is the best. I love that movie to death. If you haven't seen it, go back and find it. It's Anna Kendrick's debut. She's tremendous in it. It's a really great film, and it holds up. Like, it's still good.
One of the best renditions of Stephen Sondheim's Ladies Who Lunch.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic film, and I feel like everybody's trying to like trying to steal from that every time they make one of these kinds of movies.
Yeah.
But that movie was like not a mockumentary though. It was like in earnest, and these are like people who actually like. I felt like the people making it actually gave a shit and like they cared. I don't really felt like that about this. And I think the main thing about about theater camp that didn't work for me is I know that most of the script was improv. So they let most of these people who've probably been told that they're all great from the moment they were like 3 years old, and they're all friends. They probably find each other very funny, but they're not.
It was one of those things of like, if you weren't in on the joke,
right? They're not that funny. And there were a distinct lack of punchlines in this movie. That was the one thing I kept noticing when I was watching. It's like, where was the funny part of that scene? I'm not quite sure what it was. It seemed like they felt like there was something funny in it, but I was watching and I was like, I'm not sure where the punchline was. And I picked up on that when they started like having more and more title cards, like explaining things, because the punchlines weren't coming through in the dialogue. And I know that's what happened. I've seen it happen in too many times in movies that are largely improv. And these people aren't as funny as they think they are. And look, and you might think that I'm not like somebody who's into this world. I am. I was a drama kid in high school. So I know this world, and I know humor that works in this world, and this movie did not work. You brought the topic of Nepo babies. Nepo babies has been a real theme this year, whether you're talking about Alice Englert for bad behavior or whatever. There's been a lot of it. That's another movie that probably got a little bit more praise than it deserves. Probably because of her and who her mom is, Jane Campion. But Molly Gordon, her parents are both filmmakers. I'm almost certain that they got this movie bought and sold, and a theatrical component, which is ridiculous to me. That's wild. Even though it's only $8 million, I still think that's probably twice as much as it probably should have gotten out of Sundance. And a theatrical, I think it's just ridiculous. And that's all her parents. I'm sorry, it is. It's all her parents. Yeah. So, but that's how it works. That's how Sundance works. These movies, and I'm gonna say this about a movie that I know you like and I didn't. Shortcomings is probably the same. I'm almost certain that Randall Park in this situation, not a nepotism thing for him, more of he's a really great guy, and I'm sure that he filled that premiere with all of his friends type of thing. So I'm sure they all laughed at it, and I'm sure that's why that movie has gotten some of the praise that it's gotten, because it's not there.
Well, should we talk about it? Because
we can talk about it. Go ahead.
Okay. I really like this movie. I
know. Good for you. I'm glad you liked it. I'm not you and Karen, you both like it. My friend Karen Peterson, you all have also seen on this podcast before. You both really like Shortcomings. I
really like Shortcomings. The character of Ben, played by Justin H. Min from Umbrella Academy, also his character is named Ben on that show, which is weird.
He was in About Yang last year.
About Yang, brilliant in that. Plays a little bit of an arrogant asshole in this, which strays away from the Asian model minority stereotype, which I really loved seeing him kind of be this like grounded douche canoe, where we sort of saw like glimpses of this in the latest season of Umbrella Academy. But this is a lot. Obviously, this isn't, a sci-fi superhero film. This is an adaptation of a graphic novel. It reminded me, speaking of graphic novel, it reminded me a little bit, his character specifically, and I say this in my review, reminded me of Scott Pilgrim. Yeah.
Sacrilege.
No, Scott Pilgrim is just as whiny and bitchy and horrible as this guy. It's just that he's like in a fun, like gamer, like film. I found the similarities between them pretty staggering, to be honest. I really, yeah.
Man.
I thought it was funny. I really liked it. I liked the commentary at the beginning about movies and about Asian representation. I will say that towards the end, it teeters into melodrama, and Park definitely places a lot of blame at Ben's feet when really it's also the people around him. But I really liked it. I thought it was a great character study. I thought it was funny. We don't get a lot of funny character studies. A lot of the time they're sad, especially at Sundance. But I also, get why people didn't like it.
Yeah, this was the phoniest movie I saw at Sundance. This was first time filmmaker bullshit. I was sitting there watching it, and look, there's a good chance, because I watched it on screener and I watched it sitting next to Chris, and we were both sitting there picking it apart in Miss T3K style the entire time. So there's a chance that we were overly cruel to it, but I don't think so. This was like first time filmmaker bullshit. You got Randall Park is in there. He writes these characters like conversations he's heard other people have.
Well, he didn't write it.
But the script is like that.
Yeah.
The script is like, it has these characters spouting dialogue that you think they probably heard somebody say, and they try to recreate it, and it's just like, ugh, it sounds stilted and fake. The lead character he's the fakest of them all. He's one of those characters that, he's sitting there spouting off like movie dialogue, and it's just like, this is somebody trying to prove to us that he likes movies a lot.
How many white male characters have we seen with that? And it's freaking charming.
It's not charming here. That's the thing. Look, it's fine to make
no, but I like that he pushes against that. Is that actually a charming trait, or are we buying into something that we shouldn't be?
It's charming. It's charming along with other things that make you charming. But there's nothing charming about this character, and there's nothing real about him either. I was sitting there watching it, and I was just like, I can't think of any reason why anybody would ever talk to this guy. But then again, I couldn't think of any reason that anybody would talk to any of the other characters in the movie either, because none of them have anything interesting to say. Anything interesting to say. None of them did. And I just could not stand watching it. It's fine to make a movie about an unlikable protagonist. It happens all the time. There's a movie that came out that was at Sundance called Passages that is entirely about an unlikable character. He's awful, in fact, but he's interesting, at least. There's nothing interesting about anybody in this movie. Nothing funny about it. There's a very easy Spider-Man joke that happens in it that made me groan audibly because Jacob Batalon is in it. And I said, as soon as he showed up, I was like, here comes the Spider-Man joke. I know it's coming. And then it happened as soon as I said it. And I was just like, oh my, this is so awful. This is so terrible.
I have to.
I was like, where's the Randall Park appearance coming? Where's it at? Oh, there it is. There it is. It was just, it just felt like somebody making their first movie. It'll probably be his only movie, I hope. If it's good, if they're all going to be.
You're hoping that an Asian director
they're all going to be like this. It's nothing.
Wow, Travis.
It has to do with being Asian. It has to do with the movie being bad.
Well, and I think, but it is also rooted. I mean, there's a whole bit at the very beginning playing off of Crazy Rich Asians and how that basically, capitalized on everything. And when you're saying that none of the characters are interesting, I think that's part of the point. Like, not every. I do. I think that's part of the point. I don't think that
if you're gonna, that's such a perilous route to take. If you're gonna make a movie about all characters who aren't interesting, you better find something else that's interesting. Because
I can name four films that I saw at Sundance that were about characters that were not interesting, and yet Theater Camp is one of them. And
but that's a bad movie.
Right, but what I'm saying is, like, we're not wishing that on. They never make another movie. Molly Lieberman, or
I don't want
Molly Gordon and Nick Lieberman. I'm just saying that, like,
I don't want Molly Gordon to make another movie based off Theater Camp either.
What I'm saying is, I really liked this character story. I think you're not supposed to like them all the time. I thought the humor clicked. I get that it's not for everybody. I see why it's divisive. But I don't think just because Travis doesn't like it, you guys should completely write it off. Watch it for 20 minutes when it comes. It should not be in theaters.
Watch it for 20 minutes. If you laugh, keep watching.
Yeah. Definitely. And watch it on a big screen too. I don't know. There was something warm about it, even though these people are not likable.
How full was the theater for that one?
Not very, but it was towards the end of the festival. So, and it was a press screening.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like shortcomings. All right. Give me. Did I say that one or did you? Did you start? I started that.
Oh,
one.
I liked that one. So that was
you like. You haven't given me a movie that you don't really like yet, right? Or did you?
No, you started.
Yeah.
No, I did Theater Camp, but I have another one.
I mean, okay, because I said shortcomings.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Pod Generation.
Yeah, this looked like it could have been bad.
I don't understand Sundance's logic for the lineup, because you told me last year that the best films are often at the beginning of the festival and then they teeter out as the weekend goes on, and then you get towards the beginning half of the second week.
That's general.
You get kind of like a lot of the repeats. This was like the opening night film, and it stars Emilia Clarke. It's got
This was also like the most accessible film. Like, it was like available online like super quick.
Yeah.
I was like, and it was available for a long time.
Kind of immediately. Yeah. It's a 2-hour episode of Black Mirror, but not done well. And the characters are, you want to talk about unlikable characters that make frustrating decisions. over and over and over and over again, this is the movie.
What it's about, because it's got an odd sort of like.
So in about 100 years, most everything in America is owned by a company called Pegasus, CEO'd by a thinnish, white, bald man. Wonder where they got that. Essentially, we meet Rachel, played by Emilia Clarke, who wants to have a baby, but is pushed by her job to do it in an artificial way. And what I mean by that is they live in a world where you can have babies in a giant egg-looking thing. And it just gets more and more ingenuine from there.
He has this kid who will tell Egypt for him, right?
Yeah, and at the beginning, he's like the voice of reason, and then he completely like surrenders very early on to his wife's whims for no reason. It seems like there's and just completely buys into this idea of wanting to raise this like pod child. And it's only after like 45 times where they get screwed over by Pegasus and by her work and by this idea of a womb center that they realize that maybe a corporation like watching over the incubation of a child isn't the best thing. People make super frustrating decisions in this film. It's frustratingly laughable. I cannot just stay away from it if you're interested in like a really good futuristic show. I highly recommend Black Mirror. That's a really great route to take. Yeah. But stay away from the pod generation. I don't think it says anything new about parenthood and technology. It just feels kind of redundant and not well done.
You gotta remember, and this we talked about this a little bit when it comes to like the festival that we both attend at Middleburg as well. Festivals are about what will draw people to pay to see the movies there. And when you have a movie with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Emilia Clarke, whether it stinks or not, it's going to get I felt the same way about the movie that kind of opened the festival, which is Sometimes I Think About Dying, which stars Daisy Ridley, which is not your traditional opening night film. It doesn't really get people energized for the festival or anything. It's kind of a downbeat film, really weird, kind of offbeat, where she plays a woman who often thinks about killing herself in really weird, kind of strange ways, right? And she's a extreme introvert. She lives in this small town in Massachusetts, and she works in this little tiny office with a bunch of big personalities. So she's like the quiet one in the office, And then she meets this guy who comes into town. She meets him. He's a little bit off too, but a little bit of a bigger personality. But he's just quirky enough, just shy enough that they kind of click. They kind of work. They have the same kind of strange sense of humor, and so it's initially a little bit charming to watch these two people find each other. That's cute. It's very cute, but that's as far as it goes. Like it's not like it's a movie that's not really funny. It doesn't really have like a big visual imprint from the director or anything. It's just you kind of watch it and you just kind of feel like, yeah, the movie's there, and I've seen it, and now it's done, and that's kind of the way most people seem to react to it. Just kind of like, yeah, it was interesting, but that doesn't necessarily make a good movie.
Do you think that your expectations were too high for it because it was one of the like first films?
I expect the opening films to be like a real eye catcher. Like that's what I expect. CODA was very early last year at the festival. Most of the really early films that they show at the festival are meant to be like to really grab you, and they set the tone. They set the tone for the festival. This did set a tone for the festival. The first couple of days weren't that strong, so it did kind of set a tone. I had to pick up like from the middle on. Like that's kind of the way it worked this year. But it's I feel like if it wasn't Daisy Ridley starring in it, you probably wouldn't have seen much or heard anything about this movie.
Right.
I almost feel the same way. I'm gonna tack on my other one here. And it was not necessarily a movie that I dislike. I just don't know how people are going to treat it and that's Magazine Dreams.
Right. That was very polarizing.
Yeah, this is probably the most talked about movie at the festival for a movie that's not picked up yet, strangely enough, because it has Jonathan Majors in a year that he's poised to be gigantic with Ant-Man and Creed 3. And speaking of gigantic, so is he, because he's packed on. I can't even remember how much muscle mass he added, but he was eating 6,000 calories of food a day for this role and for Creed 3. His character is a bodybuilder with dreams of being a champion, but he's also like a disturbed man. Think Taxi Driver, think Joker. That's the kind of character he is. That's how he fits in society, or actually how he does not fit into society. That's his character. He's very toxic, definitely an incel. There's a lot of stuff going on with this guy. Now, some of the beats that this movie takes are familiar if you've seen those movies that I've previously mentioned. Seeing it from a Black man's perspective adds another layer to it, because you can, like, especially for me watching, I can feel reasons why he's angry. His town is a food desert, he's dealing with microaggressions from the cops and people that customers at the store he works at. I get why he's angry, but some of the other stuff going on with him I can't relate to, but it's just a movie that's so grim, so dark. There's not a shred of light in it at all, that I don't know how people are going to react to it other than his tremendous performance. Like, he's great in it, but I feel like if it wasn't Jonathan Majors, this is a movie we'd probably just like brush aside. If it was played by a white guy, I feel like this movie would be getting a lot of interesting criticism right now. But because it's a Black guy, it's like I said, it adds a different kind of context to it.
It sounds like it would be a really interesting double feature with The Whale.
Maybe. I just don't know. I think it's part of the reason why it hasn't been acquired yet, because they wouldn't know how to package it. I also feel like this is not the final version of this movie. I was discussing this with Tim, and a lot of the movies that appear at Sundance, these are not the final versions that you're going to get. They're going to get edited before they get a theatrical release. I feel like Magazine Dreams is in need of one more edit to kind of reshape it in a certain way, because it feels a bit baggy. There's a lot of stuff that the writer-director Elijah Bynum, who did Hot Summer Nights a couple years ago with Timothy Chalamet, is a movie I can't stand. But it feels like there's another version of this movie out there that this needs to become before it gets released.
Agreed.
Yeah. So.
I felt that about a couple of films this year, definitely, that like needed a couple edits before. Not to go into like too much detail, but probably the best named film of the festival, Aliens Abducted My Parents, and Now I Kind of Feel Left Out.
Yeah, I'm surprised I've not heard really good things about it.
It's really poorly edited and very poorly written and not directed well. I wasn't gonna like talk about it, but I would say that, like I say this in my review, that it definitely needed a couple of edits, just the script alone, before it was made into something. It could have been really great in Spielbergian. There's a point where one of the characters is playing notes that she thought aliens, like she heard from an alien spaceship, and you think that she's going to go and do the Close Encounters theme.
Yeah,
but they just don't. There's a lot of things that they don't take opportunities on, and the script is like overwrought with a lot of really bad jokes. And I know that the Razzies are getting a bunch of shit for nominating a child for a worst actor performance. There's a performance in here that's a real stinker from a kid. And it's not entirely the kid's fault.
I always say kids are the worst actors. I hate kid actors. I hate them. So,
well, it's not entirely.
I didn't see this movie.
The words coming out of the kid's mouth is not the kid's fault. So I definitely blame the writing.
There's nothing worse than a bad kid actor. Good God. All right, a couple of things.
The main girl is played by I forget her first name, but she is Jacob Tremblay's sister.
Oh wow.
Sister.
Okay.
Yeah, sister.
Jacob Tremblay's kind of hit or miss. Anyway, so a couple other movies I'm going to mention before we kind of move on to movies that I think could possibly be, if we've seen any movies that could be the Oscar contender for next year, maybe. A couple of movies I'll mention. Eileen with Thomas and McKenzie and Hathaway. I'm not going to talk about it too long. Most people take a look at the opening image and read the synopsis and think this looks like in Sundance's version of Carol. That is exactly what they want you to think. It is not that movie. It has a tremendous twist about 3/4 of the way through. So definitely go in there as cold as possible. But I really enjoyed that one. And I'll mention Polite Society since it's sitting there on my screen in the upper right corner. Polite Society is a movie that I think a lot of people are going to like more than I did. I didn't like it that much, but I know from other people who really loved it, and I know because it's already been acquired. I think it's going to be coming out before too long. When it does come out, a lot of people are going to love it because it's kind of a Jane Austen-esque storyline, seen from a perspective of a Pakistani American girl. It combines romance and sci-fi and fantasy and all sorts of weird stuff. I felt like the mix of styles and the tone was wrong. That was my main thing. There are some things that they want us to take seriously that I couldn't because it was right next to something absurd. It's just some things didn't feel quite they gelled quite right. But this is another movie that I think if framed a different kind of way, it would have been tremendous. But I think most your casual person won't give a shit about all that and they'll just like it, which is fine. So yeah, and Run Rabbit Run, because that's in my lower right corner there, which is a movie kind of in the vein of The Babadook, Hereditary, Goodnight Mommy, all these horror thrillers that are centered around motherhood. And this one is perfectly fine. It stars Sarah Snook from Succession, so I'll see anything with her. But it just fails to do anything that separates it from other better movies that are doing the same thing. That's my big takeaway from it. I saw that back to back with Sometimes I Think About Dying, so I was just like, yeah, rough start to Sundance. So
I would also like to shout out one of the most divisive films of the festival too, which is Cat Person, which is Susanna Fogel's. I think it's her feature. No, it's not, because she did The Spy Who Loved Me.
Right.
Or yeah, The Spy Who Dumped Me. Right. But she also is responsible for part of the script of Booksmart, and it stars, as you spoke of Sarah Snook, it stars Nicholas Braun and Amelia Jones. And while I had issues with Amelia Jones in Fairyland, I thought that she was miscast in that. I thought that once they get to the most awkward kiss in cinema history in Cat Person, I knew that she was going to be able to take us to the end. It is based on a New Yorker short story that kind of like took everybody by storm. Yeah. And I will say the last act of the movie is not where the story ends. They kind of had to take it to, sometimes what they do with adaptations is up the ante. Weirdly, this movie is written by the same woman who wrote Operation Mincemeat and the John Adams miniseries, which doesn't make any sense to me because in tone and kind of subject matter, it is very reminiscent of Promising Young Woman and Fresh. Yet it has some people behind it, that are very sophisticated. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that we'll see how people react to this. It's very funny.
Who has that? Who's acquired that one?
I know Studio Canal, I believe, is distributing it. I just don't know when and where. Okay. So we'll see how that comes out. It was definitely one of the most divisive ones that I heard about at the festival and saw.
All right, so wrapping things up a little bit. So every year, the Oscar nominations come out while we are in Park City. I hate it. Hate that they do that. I wish they would wait until the festival was over, just because it makes for an annoying morning having to wake up even earlier than usual to cover that and then go watch Sundance movies. But every year, I always ask the same question the day that those come out. Have we seen anything that makes us think this will be an Oscars 2024 movie? And last year I don't think anybody would have predicted CODA. I don't think anyone would have done that. In fact, nobody did. And I don't know if I know anything, if I saw anything this year that makes me instantly feel like this is an Oscar movie. It's not like when I saw Brooklyn and I said, that's going to be a best picture contender, and you just kind of instantly know. There's sometimes that when that happens here at Sundance. But I think a film that I saw at the end, like the last movie I saw in person, could be one that I think could be a sneaky choice. And you just mentioned it, and it's Fairyland. Like, I feel like whether or not you thought it was, I don't remember what your review of it was, honestly, what you gave it, but I watched it and I was like, of the movies that I've seen that feel like a possibility to catch on if somebody released it later in the year, this could be it. Like, it's got a really dramatic storyline. It's got Scoot McNairy in it. It's set during the late 70s and early 80s, right around the AIDS epidemic. And he plays a homosexual man a single father raising his daughter, who's, going through quite a few changes. She goes through quite an arc in the film, I would say, and it feels like something that could catch on. I don't know if I felt anything else about any other movie that could have felt that way, despite there being a lot of other movies that I liked more than it necessarily. This felt like a movie that if it was released at the right time and pushed the right way, it could catch on and be an Oscar movie. That's the only one I could think of on the top of my head.
Last year, I thought that the one movie I saw that could be at the Oscars this year was Living. Mm-hmm. It had all of the trappings of an Oscar movie. And it has been nominated with Bill Nye.
I still haven't watched it. I feel bad about that too.
I don't know if we would. Anyway, for me, I don't see a Best Picture nomination, at least of the feature films. I'm sure that one of the docs will be thrown in there. I feel like there's always at least one.
The docs I can't really rate because I never really
we didn't really cover docs this year. But I will say that I could see different categories, right? I could see a song from Flora and Sons being nominated. I am sure that if I sat down and watched that La Mamacita, the Penelope Cruz movie, I'm sure that there's an Oscar worthy performance there from her. I will say that I think Lily Gladstone has an Oscar worthy performance. I don't necessarily think that she will be. It depends on when this is released, and it depends on when Flower Moons come out. Especially, it might be one of those things where those two powerful performances come out in the same year and she's nominated for one, but it's really like an unspoken thing that she's nominated for both.
Right.
Kind of like
that movie
a couple of years ago.
I feel like Fancy Dance is destined for indie spirit,
it's got independent spirit all over it, baby. That's a different conversation. But I don't know. I don't really necessarily. I think to go back to Fairyland, I mean, it's produced by Sofia Coppola. I was
there. I passed her in the hallway.
Yeah, I think the biggest Oscar performance or Oscar-worthy thing about that is Scoot McNairy.
He's really great.
He's amazing in it.
Really great.
It's perfect the entire time, moving. I'm glad that he's kind of getting a moment. I think he is, we had a huge discussion about Scoot McNairy at the festival about, I think he is one of the most underrated character actors working. As you said, he probably wants to stay that way. But I think, he could be nominated and get some due credit, at least in the supporting actor category. Again, I don't really see anything that is in 9 months, this is going to be the film everyone's talking about.
Right. I think I could see Jonathan Majors possibly breaking into Best Actor.
Yeah, I could see that
too. The reaction to that movie, though. I mean, it really is going to depend on what the reaction to that film is.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, and a lot of the films I liked were these besides really Fancy Dance, had this indie comedy vibe that just doesn't go with the Oscars. So, I don't know. I don't know if that's a sense of something changing at Sundance, or, it definitely feels like the last couple of years have been a little bit of transition periods for the festival. So, and that's understandable with COVID. But I was surprised that there wasn't one film that I felt okay, this is it. Again, I think Fancy Dance was the best thing there. And but again, it's not getting the kind of uproar I think it deserves. And I just don't see it going all the way at Oscars, especially like, honestly, if we were to compare a film buzz to it, I feel like To Leslie might be a good representation. It's more of a To Leslie than in Everything Everywhere. So we'll see what happens with it.
All right. Yeah, the To Leslie thing is funny. All right. So this has been an interesting Sundance. This will essentially wrap up some of our coverage of Sundance. We got a few more things that will be going up later today. And that'll wrap up our Sundance 2023 coverage. But it's been a good year. Sundance has always been really great to punch drunk critics for the last decade plus. Is why we go every year. They're really great people there. It's a great festival. They've treated us very well. And it's always fun to go there and see these movies early and put our stamp on it a little bit. And Cortland, I'm glad you got to go there for the first time this year, and I hope you go back again with us next year maybe. So we'll see how that goes. But
Uh-oh.
No, I don't mean it like that way. I mean, like, just, we'll see if I go next year. Honestly, if the online is exactly the same, I might decide I don't want to. I might decide that I want to stay home and watch it from home. But then again, I also know me, and I love Park City. So I love being in Park City. The cold, I love the cold when other people don't.
I loved coming back here and it being in like the 40s and 50s and people complaining about how cold it is. And I'm like, This is great. Are you kidding?
We were in single digits in Park City.
I mean, and you told me it was one of the colder years.
This is one of the coldest years that it's been. And I loved it. I never felt, I don't feel the cold there. There's no humidity there either. So it's just like.
That's the good thing.
Really
Tim, who you mentioned of Film Gordon, he was cold the entire time and wouldn't stop complaining about it.
I know. He always complains about the cold.
Yeah,
that's why he wears too much. He wears too many layers and then he gets overheated. That's a whole other story.
Anyway, about it.
Anyway, this has been a great year at Sundance. Cortland, I want to thank you for coming on the show and talking with me about it, recapping this year's Sundance 2023. Everybody, you can find us every day at punchdrunkcritics.com. You know that. And if you want to look for me, you can find me on multiple places here in DC, including WETA Around Town and Good Morning Washington. All right. Thanks, everybody. I will see you next time. Goodbye. Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're laying down, please subscribe to our channel and click the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest stuff.